Welcome back to Sprague Homestead. So today I'm going to be kind of talking about something that I'm getting a lot of questions about, and that is rabbit sneezing and nasal discharge. So generally a lot of the questions involving discharge and sneezing and that kind of stuff come up in the winter months, but we've been getting a lot of them here in the last month or so, and this is for a variety of reasons which I'll go through as we talk about this. If you just go onto Google and look up rabbit sneezing, snot, nasal discharge, that kind of thing, almost everything you see is going to tell you that it's Pasteurella and they need immediate vet intervention or to be culled. Luckily, this is not necessarily the case. So, snot is an interesting problem in the rabbit community, and one that you see rabbit breeders in particular are really, really quick to cull for, sometimes unnecessarily. So, Pasteurella is a contagious disease, is how they have it listed through any of the veterinary books that you can get. It's listed as a contagious disease of the sinuses. It can be caused by a couple of different bacteria, one of which is staph. The other one is an actual Pasteurella bacteria. And what it does is it can cause issues in the respiratory tract. Generally what it does is it sets up shop in the nasal cavity, and it manifests through discharge. So you'll see white snot a lot of times and a lot of sneezing. You'll get matted fur. It can spread up into the eye and cause a conjunctivitis. It can get up into the ears, cause ear infections that lead to wry neck. So it can be kind of nasty. The thing that a lot of websites don't discuss is the fact that studies have now been done to where they're pretty sure that Pasteurella is in all domestic rabbits, all of them. The big thing is whether or not your rabbit is actually manifesting this and actually showing symptoms and signs. What we breed for in the rabbit community, or what we should be breeding for, is really strong immune systems. So even if they have Pasteurella, which, like I said, they pretty much all do, you don't want to see the signs and symptoms of it. So there is a belief that if a rabbit is exhibiting signs and symptoms, they should be culled from the herd. I don't exactly take that stance. When it comes to nasal discharge, in my opinion, you have to go through and figure out first and foremost what is causing it. Even if it's Pasteurella, there's going to be something else going on. Either the rabbit's under extreme stress or is in some sort of environment that's causing this to flare up. If it's not, if everything is just okay and the rabbit starts exhibiting all this and you can pretty definitively figure out that it's Pasteurella, then by all means remove it from your gene pool. You don't want something that is going to be a systemic carrier that will have these flare-ups for no reason. I've had it. I've gotten a couple rabbits over the years that would just flare up with it for no reason. But first, before you jump to that conclusion, you really need to look and see if there are other things going on. So the first thing, when you see sneezing or hear sneezing, really take the rabbit out and take a look at it. Oftentimes there is no snot whatsoever, and I'm going to say snot because that's what everybody calls it, but nasal discharge, usually there's nothing there anyway. Rabbits can sneeze for a whole host of reasons. I've heard of stress responses. If they've maybe moved to a new environment, they might be sneezing. Seems a little odd, but we all stress out a little bit differently. Molt season is another reason, and I get a lot of rabbits sneezing. Right now, half of my barn is sneezing with no snot, no nothing, because the fur is flying in there so thick that it's hard to keep a hold of, all the fur coming out. So it can be during molt. Maybe you got a really dusty batch of feed. That's happened to us before too, and that always worries me because you'll come in and there'll be rabbits with yellow crusty crap on their nose, and it's nothing. It's just that we've got into too many fines, that real fine dust in the bottom of a feeder. It's aggravated the nasal cavity, as it will with anybody. They sneeze, nose waters, and it clumps up and it becomes yellow garbage on their nose. Another reason you can be really dusty and dry, like right now we are uber dry. So on really windy days we're kicking up a lot of dust that can blow into the rabbitry, and I'll get a few sneezes in there, just kind of the way it is right now. High humidity in the barn. This happens a lot during the winter because, like I said, I get more of these usually during the winter months. High humidity can cause essentially a cold is kind of what happens. And that can actually even become pneumonia. So kind of the first step is to know what is going on. If none of that is applicable, then you need to start looking at, okay, pull the rabbit out, really look at him. If there is signs of discharge, what's it look like? A lot of times if it's clear, it's an obstruction. If it's yellow, most of the time, it's a deeper respiratory infection, and now we're talking probably pneumonia. You can usually lift a rabbit, cradle the back of its head and lift it up and listen to it. And a lot of times you'll hear that congestion in the chest. Now remember, Pasteurella starts out in the nasal cavity. So if you hear it in the chest, a lot of times what you're dealing with is an upper respiratory infection and or pneumonia. And sometimes the discharge will be to the whitish side, but most of the time in a true pneumonia upper respiratory case, it's going to be yellow or yellow tinted. In those cases, you need to get on some antibiotics. Nothing else is really going to clear that up, just because it's already down into the chest. The best thing to treat it with is Baytril. That is something you have to take them to the veterinarian for. I know people who have cleared it up with Duromycin and penicillin. I have not used either one to treat a respiratory infection, so I really can't advise you there. The few times that I've had them that I've treated them, I used to use Terramycin in the water, and it would usually knock it out. Unfortunately, they changed the laws on it. You can't pick it up at the feed store anymore. But if you have some on hand, you can try that, or if you can get a vet to work with you, you might be able to get some. The big thing with rabbits is always about dosing. And unfortunately, you need to find a vet that's really willing to work with you. The first time I had a case of what I now know was probably pneumonia, I took the rabbit into the vet, and they diagnosed her as Pasteurella without any test and put us on an antibiotic to treat for Pasteurella flare-up that was not effective enough for the pneumonia, and I did end up losing her after $300 of vet bills. So it's really important to find somebody that's got some rabbit experience. If you take a rabbit in and the first thing the vet says is it's Pasteurella without a test, walk away. Pasteurella can be tested for. It's a nasal swab. I know people who will swab out their barn if they've got a whole bunch of rabbits acting up and send them in, and you can actually have them tested yourself. So getting back to it, if the discharge is white, usually that's going to be Pasteurella. If you've just seen it starting to pop up, when you lift that rabbit to listen, a lot of times you'll hear a little sinusy, sounds, but it's not going to be all the way into the chest. Pasteurella really likes to hang out in the head and in the nasal cavity. So what do you do if it's Pasteurella? Well, like I said, it's kind of one of those things. All rabbits carry it. So if you know that there is something else going on, if it's molt, if it's stress, if it's high heat, if it's thunderstorms, if whatever it is, if you know something else has triggered this, I usually tell people to get a bottle of VetRx. I use the one that's listed for poultry. I think it says poultry respiratory, whatever. You can get it on Amazon. I'll try and get Kanan to find a link for it. But you can use VetRx, a couple drops in the nose a couple times a day, and that'll usually clear it up. If it's going to be a chronic situation, you're going to know, because after you've run through 3 to 4 days of VetRx, it will be back. It may not necessarily get any worse, but it will be back. And my rule of thumb is I will treat it once to see if I can figure out what it is. And I've had rabbits where, we present with discharge. I run them, I always isolate them when there's a presentation like that. Go ahead and isolate them. We isolate, we treat with VetRx, we wait 14 days. If nothing else is going on, I'll put them back into the herd because we're all pretty much separated out anyway. I'll put them back into the herd. If they present again, a lot of times I'll cull. I think I've only had that happen twice, and I have literally had hundreds of rabbits come through here in the last 5 or 6 years. So Pasturella is definitely something to be concerned with. We should be breeding for rabbits that have superior immune systems, but things do happen. Particularly cold, wet winters, really hot, dry summers, things that will send them into stress. They're already carrying it. All these kind of things need to have is just that little opening, right? That little momentary depression of the immune system, and these kind of things will blossom. The big thing is you don't want to have a systemic carrier in your herd that's going to constantly be having this. And they will pass that weak immune system on to their offspring. So that right there is kind of my advice with it. I'm not a big quick to cull kind of person. I think that a lot of really good animals get culled out prematurely. I've known some people that the first little sign of a sneeze and that was it. We had a nice gentleman here not too long ago send me a message that was panicked over the fact that he'd just gotten a couple rabbits and they were sneezing. There was no discharge, but everything online was telling him to cull and that it was Pasturella. Come to find out, he had put them in a room with cedar walls. And if you know much about cedar, it kind of doesn't necessarily off-gas, but it continues to put out chemicals pretty much through the life of the wood. And rabbits and other small animals are extremely sensitive to cedar. This is why we don't recommend cedar bedding. And he moved him out of the room and it stopped. So sneezing can be a big deal, but always try to get to the bottom of it first as to what might be causing it before you make any rash decisions. And try a little treatment. Like I said, we keep the VetRx on hand and have used it quite effectively with the few rabbits that we've had that have popped up with discharge. And that's kind of my take on it. Okay, so if you have other questions, comments, advice on rabbits that are sneezing and discharge, please feel free to leave them down in the comments. You can always send me an email if you have questions at srhomestead@yahoo.com. And hit me up on Instagram, Facebook, all the like. So that is it for today from Sprague River Homestead. And I'm going to try and get some work done. Happy homesteading.